Guten Yardening, everybody! Today I'm going to walk you through a resource that we've begun compiling that talks about some of the vegetables that you can plant now in February indoors that can then be transplanted later on as we head into the warmer months. And we're going to show you some of the more common vegetables, some of the germination periods, etc. here for Zone 5. Now, if you don't know what your growing zone is, there is this USDA Plant Hardiness Zone map. So if you can find where you're located, you can also then find your growing zone. Now, this growing zone is important because it determines, or it helps determine, not only which vegetables are hardy in your area, but when you should be planting or transplanting those vegetables. Growing Zone 5 encompasses at least parts of each of the states listed right here. And so if you live in one of these states, this could be your growing zone, though you can search for your specific zip code. Our last frost date is typically around May 15th, and our first frost date is typically around October 15th. So while today's video is focused in on Zone 5, if you're in a different zone and you would like to see this same resource created for your zone, leave a comment in the description and let us know, and we'll try to do that for you. Now, if you are new to the channel, we'd like to welcome you here for the first time, and we encourage you to take a look at some of our other content. We hope it will be helpful for you as you are planning your gardening, growing indoors or outdoors. And if you're returning to the channel, well, welcome back. Let's get into this resource. Today we're going to focus in on 7 common vegetables that you can plant in February in Zone 5. Now, you do have to remember that the dates and times that we're going to show you today are approximations. They're based on our research and our own personal experience, but you have to keep in mind that we don't control the weather, and so if you think about your first and last frosts and how those sometimes vary, even in different places in Zone 5, that is something to take into consideration as you plan out your garden. So the first vegetable we're going to focus on is the onion. Now, I'm confident that many of you start your onions from starts or sets. You should remember that sets are typically smaller as an end product than starts are. But if you want to plant onion seeds, you only need about 4 to 10 days of germination time at around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. They're quick germinating, even though in terms of maturation, they can take a very long time. One of the benefits of starting onions indoors is that the end result, because you have that extra growing time starting in February, the end result is a bigger onion. And when we're talking about a maturation period of 100 to the upper end of 175 days, when we're in Zone 5 where there's about 115-day growing period, you need to get that early start in order to maximize the size of the onions. Because unless you're planting short day onions, which can handle a little bit of that cold weather, you're going to want to get these out of the ground while the temperature is still warm outside. Leeks are another favorite of ours, but they are also one of the longer growing vegetables. The range for leeks is anywhere from 50 to 150 days to maturity. Now, that 50 days is not very common. It's for a milder, more tender version of the leek. Typically, we're looking at least 120 to 150 days of growth. And so again, if you have a shorter grow zone time frame like we do in Zone 5, you need to get them started as early as possible. And for leeks, you want to get them started. It takes about 10 to 14 days for them to germinate at about 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to bring them outside in March to April, somewhere in that range, when they are around 4 to 6 inches tall. Now, one major difference between leeks and onions, other than the taste, is that the leeks are not daylight sensitive. So it's not like they need that longer daylight period depending on the variety. So you can actually get these outside before the last frost, up to 4 to 6 weeks before the last frost. Another one of our personal favorites is the bell pepper. And bell peppers are a little bit shorter compared to the first 2 varieties here. Their germination time is anywhere from 7 to 21 days. They do like a warmer germination space between 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 26 to 32 degrees Celsius. And so if you have a seedling heating mat that might be an ideal place for these to start. They will still germinate outside of this range. If it's a little bit cooler, it just might take a little bit longer. And again, this is an estimated optimal temperature range. Bell peppers also prefer warmer temperatures, so you're actually going to be starting these seeds about 8 to 10 weeks before you transplant them outdoors in mid-May. Now, they mature between 60 and 90 days, but many people harvest their peppers while they're still green. And you might not know this, but a ripe bell pepper is not green. One of the reasons why green bell peppers are typically a little cheaper in the stores is because farmers, when they harvest them, don't have to wait for them to ripen to that yellow, orange, red color. They can just harvest them a little bit earlier. So the taste is a little less sweet, at least from our experience, and you might notice that. So if you leave your bell peppers out for that full 90 days or let them stay on the vine a little bit longer, you'll start to see that color change and you'll get a taste change as well. Celery is one of those vegetables that if you don't currently grow them, we highly recommend. They take a little bit longer in terms of germination, up to about 3 weeks. If that optimal temperature is at 75, it might go a little bit faster. And they take longer for maturation, between 130 to 140 days. But one of the things that's really important to note about celery, and it's kind of the opposite of lettuce, you transplant this in mid-May because if the weather gets below about 55, that encourages the celery to bolt. So cooler weather encourages bolting in celery versus, say, a lettuce where that warmer temperature encourages bolting. 130 to 140 days sounds like a really long time, but one of the other cool things about celery, if you've never grown it before, or even if you have, we don't actually harvest the celery all at once. We take off the stalks out of the outer area and we harvest them one at a time, and that means that our celery is continually growing because it grows from the center out. It's continually growing for the entire season. Most recently, our celery lasted well over 6 months from the time of planting outdoors, and we were harvesting from it daily. And one other thing, if you do plant celery, just remember that the entire stalk, leaves and all, are edible. Eggplant is another one of our personal favorites. One of the nice things about starting eggplant is that the germination rate is pretty quick, about 2 weeks, and the temperature range to start it is pretty wide. So you can actually start this indoors on a windowsill pretty easily because that temperature of 60 to 95 degrees, again, wide range, easy to start. Now the maturation for this is between 100 and to 120 days, but one of the things that you should note is that you should wait until about mid-May to transplant this outdoors because eggplant does not like the cold. It's very susceptible to cold damage, as we've found out in seasons past, and so you want that temperature outside to be nice and warm, again, around mid-May, and you're going to find that that 100 to 120 days passes really quickly because once these start providing eggplants, they don't stop. You do want to harvest these regularly as that does encourage greater growth. If you're somebody who loves spices, it is perfectly fine and actually works really well to grow your spices like your thyme, oregano, and rosemary indoors. But starting these from seeds and transplanting them outdoors is also relatively straightforward. The thyme and the rosemary take 2 to 4 weeks to germinate. The oregano is a little faster, between 1 and 2 weeks. And again, that optimal temperature is around 70 degrees. So that's pretty much an upstairs indoor temperature for a lot of houses. So again, as long as you have access to light, you'd be fine germinating them wherever in your house. The maturation for these are much quicker in general, 45 to 90 days. Again, like a lot of other vegetables, you can start harvesting off of these relatively early on and they will keep producing. So you start these in February, you transplant them outside when it gets a bit warmer, again around mid-May. These particular spices are perfect for keeping in containers outdoors as well. So you can bring them indoors whenever the temperatures do start to fall back down and start to get a little too cold for them out there. You can bring them indoors and extend their lives as well. If you're not new to the channel, I think you had to know that this slide was coming because sweet potatoes are one of our absolute favorites to grow, and we start them indoors in February. We start our slips both in water and in soil, and the slip maturity time is between 6 to 8 weeks. So now is the time you want to get these going, because when we transplant these out in May, they need that longer growing period in general. Now, there are some varieties like the Beauregard or the Georgia Jet that they will tell you these are bush varieties and they will grow within 80 to 90 days. But if you can, you want to give your sweet potatoes as much time in warm soil as possible. That 120 days is no joke. The longer you can give them, from our experience, the bigger they're going to get. Now, that 6 to 8 weeks of slip maturity time is somewhere between 75 and 85 degrees. Sweet potatoes don't just love warm soil, they love that warm air. So if you get started now with creating those slips, you are going to see a much more bountiful harvest, because you're going to have much longer for those sweet potatoes to be out there growing for you. We hope this video was beneficial to anyone living in planting zone 5. And if you are in a different growing zone and you'd like to see a similar resource created for you, please leave us a comment down below. Or if you have specific vegetables you're interested in growing and would like similar information, we will be compiling these in the future. But again, you gotta let us know. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, even in February, when you're with us, you are good to grow.